Hi everyone, I am Carrie Robb from St. Louis County Library, and I'm thrilled to be hosting today's virtual author event for young readers with artist, writer, and teacher Juliet Menéndez. We will be discussing Juliet's beautiful, inspiring new children's book, Latinitas, celebrating 40 big dreamers. So Juliet, welcome to St. Louis.
Hi, thank you. This is so great.
So before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you to HEC Media, who's producing this virtual children's event, and to our indie bookstore partner, The Novel Neighbor. You can order your copy of Latinitas at thenovelneighbor.com. So March is Women's History Month, and I'm so happy we can share this incredible book with our young readers. Latinitas collects short biographies of activists, politicians, teachers, doctors, scientists, writers, and more from all over Latin America and the United States, and pairs these women's stories with Juliet's beautiful hand-painted illustrations. Our guest, Juliet Menéndez, is a Guatemalan-American artist and writer. She studied art and design in Paris and Italy, and she's worked as an art teacher in New York. So Juliet, just to get us started, do you want to tell us a little about what inspired this project?
Of course, yeah. Well, as you were mentioning, I have a background in teaching, and I was working as an art teacher at the time back in 2014, which I can't believe how many years it's been. And it started out as a poster project because while I was walking around the schools where I was teaching, which were in Upper Manhattan, I would see posters of people like Benjamin Franklin, and Einstein and Dali, and those are great posters to have. But I was looking around, and my students, they were from families from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and Mexico. And I was thinking, it would be great to have people that they could look up to on these walls that came from similar backgrounds to them. And that's how it started as a poster project. But the thing that happened was that while I was working on these initial posters, I realized, I was delving into Latinx history, and I was getting really excited about learning about all of these different people that I could put up. And I kept finding time and time again that I was barely finding women. And when I did, they were often in the footnotes or, kind of like on the sidelines. And I was, I think as women, we see this, and then, it really brought out the feminist in me. And I was like, I'm going to dedicate this project to celebrating them first and foremost. So that's how it became Latinitas.
So you cover 40 women over a long span of time. You must have had to do so much research. What all did you do to gather this information and to bring these stories together?
Yeah, it was quite a process in and of itself, getting all of this together. It took about 2 years of intense research, not to mention a year before getting just the list together of the women. And what went into it was looking at, old web archives, newspaper articles, books that oftentimes were out of print. So I had to track them down and find, where I could find them, oftentimes in random places in Latin America. I had to figure out where they might be. Having people help me and send me pieces of information that I couldn't find, as well as looking into documentaries made about these women during their lifetimes, which were so beautiful.
In the introduction, you talk about how the women that you selected, they're there because they broke barriers and they really kind of shaped history in a lot of ways, but that you also chose women that you admired because of their attitude toward life. And I'm really curious about what that attitude was that drew you in, and kind of how you narrowed it down to these 40 dreamers that you feature.
That's a beautiful question. And I think this attitude towards life, I was giving this a lot of thought, especially when Kamala Harris became our first vice president. And I was thinking, what is it that people like her, that people like these women bring that inspires me so much? And she was saying something in her speech about, opening these doors, but making sure they stay open for the generations to come and the women following. And I think that when I say attitude towards life, that really was a big part of that attitude, that, like Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, she doesn't see herself as this exceptional woman, even though, what didn't she do? But she really saw all women as having this capacity to do all of these things that she was doing, and she wrote about it, and she defended them, and she thought about, you know, the light that each woman has inside and could see that in others. And that was true of really everyone that I included in this book, that they wanted all women to be able to do these things, to be able to shine. And that was really what it was, this attitude.
Great. And you start each biography with a glimpse into the woman's childhood. You're really coming from their childhood with each story. Each of the women, it's you know, you feature a picture of the person as a child. So oops, I just lost my page. So like, you know, here you have Dolores Huerta, who was an activist, and you depicted her in her Girl Scout uniform when she was a kid. So your pictures are showing them as children. Why did you really want to come from this place of writing about them as children?
Yeah, that was very important to me from the beginning. I was working in schools, in elementary schools, and I realized that, you know, sometimes these role models that we have, they seem so distant to us, because they've done amazing things, but when you see them in that moment of when they've accomplished so much and there they are, it can seem like a million miles away or years away, you know, that you could get there. And I wanted children to see how they began, how that little spark that set them off on their journeys, and, you know, what it was that they were interested in, what they played, what they explored, what kind of things they were discovering when they were children that led to them to become these incredible women later. And that was something that I really wanted to make sure was part of it, that they were relatable, that children could see themselves in them. And that was really the big push behind having them as children, and sticking to that.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, we talk about the importance of representation as librarians and teachers all the time. And I think it was just such a warm and inspiring way for kids to pick up your book and see themselves in the illustrations. So that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about the artistic process behind the illustrations? These are all hand painted.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so I love watercolors. It's something that really inspires me. It makes me want to create art, being able to do these things by hand. And I know in this day and age, it seems kind of crazy, but that's really what motivates me. So I actually draw each of the illustrations first in pencil. So I just, you know, I figure out the lines that I want, and then I I create a larger version in watercolor, and I paint that by hand. And the backgrounds, they are also watercolor backgrounds, but I did use Photoshop to put the image with the background. So there is a bit of technology in there, but it's mainly done by hand.
They're beautiful. They're such like clean, neat lines. I don't think of that as like a watercolor style so much. Usually you have the kind of blending with watercolors, but you've got it's just such clean, beautiful illustrations. I really like that.
I've been so inspired in college. I did printmaking, and I've always been so inspired by these bold, flat colors, and artists like Guatemalan artist Carlos Merida. He also uses that a lot as well. And you know, Czech matchbook design. I really have always loved that kind of bold style that you can get from flat colors. So even though it's not exactly a watercolor style, I think the colors that I could get with watercolors was something that really attracted me, combined with this more kind of graphic print style that has always inspired me. So
Well, I was amazed by the scope that the book covers. I mean, you have artists that a lot of people are familiar with, like Frida Kahlo, and then you have people that are, you know, our everyday newsmakers. Like we've got Sonia Sotomayor covered here, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is featured. But there's a number of people here who were completely new to me, and I really loved that experience of encountering these new stories. So were there any people who were just totally new to you, and who did you learn about that was most surprising?
for sure. You know, I wish I had known about all of these women growing up, but as you were saying, some people surprised you. And I think that was a big part of the process for me. You know, I would be researching someone like Julia de Burgos, who I did know about, but I wanted to learn more. And while I was researching her, I found a video of Victoria Santa Cruz reading her poem, Me Gritaron Negra. And I was just incredibly moved by her poem. And I found out so much more about her, that she was also a choreographer and a director and a philosopher. And I was like, oh my God, how do I not know about this woman, and I was just blown away. And that was true of other women in the book as well. Another one of these fantastic examples of someone who just has so much in them. She was not only a playwright but a congresswoman. She, all these different things that she ended up doing, and yeah, that was true for some of the different women in the book.
Well, I think we're going to do a little read aloud section. I know this is probably a really difficult question, but do you have a favorite that you would like to read aloud and share with us?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have a favorite. I love them all. There are some stories that are a little bit more personal to me, but someone that really surprised me in my research, especially because I was looking for Latinas in science and technology. And I was wondering, I wonder how far back I can go and find a Latina that was doing something related to that. And when I found Antonia Navarro from El Salvador, I couldn't believe it. She's from, here's her picture. Here we go. She's from the late 1800s, and I was just blown away that she got a degree in engineering. So I'll read. Is it okay to read a little bit about her?
Definitely, please
Okay.
do.
From the time Antonia was a young girl growing up in El Salvador, she was already questioning the things people said. When her brother's teachers told her, "Girls aren't smart enough to do math," Antonia went ahead and tried it anyway. Watching her single mother raise her and her brothers, Antonia learned to believe in herself. She taught herself algebra, technical drawing, and trigonometry too. She hiked through the clouds, studying the craters of volcanoes and the levels of the sea. Then, in 1887, even though only men were allowed to attend universities, Antonia fought her way into the engineering school at the Universidad de El Salvador. It was there that she became fascinated with the moon. At night from her bed, she would chart each of the moon's phases. What she wanted to see most was the harvest moon she had been told about in class, but she never saw it. Could it be, she wondered as she calculated each angle carefully, that this moon can't actually be seen by everybody? With proof after proof, it became clear there were missing facts that the European astronomers had failed to explore. One day, she announced to her professors, "There is no harvest moon in El Salvador or in many other countries around the world." "Who does this señorita think she is?" her professor said. But seeing her thesis with detailed calculations and drawings, they had to agree. Antonia had made history. Her proofs were published in the newspaper, and she became the first woman in all of Central America to graduate from university. News of her discovery traveled all around the world, reminding mathematicians and scientists alike how important it is to challenge assumptions when new facts come to light.
That's wonderful. I was so amazed at how there really is something for any kid in this book based on their interest. I mean, you have sports figures, like the soccer player.
Marta Viera.
Yeah, and I was so amazed by the story of the ballet dancer Alicia Alonso that lost her sight. That was a beautiful story. Of course, as a library person, I was really drawn to the writers that were featured. I think there's such a rich tradition of poetry and storytelling in Latin America. So a number of my favorite writers were included, like Isabel Allende and Julia Alvarez. But there were quite a few new discoveries there for me too. Gabriela Mistral, first person or first woman from Latin America to win the Nobel Prize. That was a wonderful story. But as a librarian, there's one person I was hoping we could spend a few minutes with, and that's Pura Belpre. Can you tell us a bit about this amazing woman?
Yes, Pura Belpre she was definitely one of my favorites from the beginning. Well, I told you, I don't have favorites, but I was so inspired by her story from the very beginning when I started this project as a poster project. She came to New York. She was living in Puerto Rico, and she came to New York for her sister's wedding. And she realized that the library was hiring bilingual librarians, and as a child growing up, she had loved storytelling, she had loved teaching, and she was actually studying teaching in Puerto Rico. And so she ended up deciding to take this job in New York and become this bilingual librarian in Harlem. And what's so incredible to me is just how she made the library such an incredibly welcoming place to new immigrants. And I think, I love that you're a librarian as well. I respect librarians so much, and I know how much of an impact they had in my own life growing up, and just how you could go and ask them about anything and they could direct you. And I love that connection of being able to ask and be directed. And, they have this wealth of knowledge that for a child, I think is just so important and so special. And for the Latinx population at that time, the immigrant population in New York, they really didn't have a place that felt welcoming like that in that way. And she made the New York Public Library that specific type of space, and even published the very first Spanish language book published by a mainstream US publisher. So she really brought not only making this welcoming place, and she would invite Latinx authors to come and talk there. And, she did all these events with her adorable puppet shows that she would do, showing these folk tales and things like this from Puerto Rico. She really made, I would say she really made Latin American culture more part of the mainstream as well by publishing these books in Spanish. And so I think it's just, she's incredible all around. And I'm so glad you asked about her. She's definitely someone who inspired me so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing to think that something as commonplace now as having, bilingual books and bilingual programming, she was really kind of the person who broke the ground on that and introduced it to the New York Public Library. And yeah, you can go watch her puppet shows on YouTube still. I went and checked some out after reading your book.
Yes.
They're so wonderful. I love her puppet shows.
They're great.
I very much.
She made them herself, the puppets.
Yeah, they're so cute. It's adorable. So everybody watching should go check that out too. So back to the book. I'm curious about what all these women had in common that led them to be such groundbreakers and world changers. Do you think there's something in their families or a way that they were encouraged as children?
I was thinking a lot about this question. It's a hard question to answer because they come from so many different backgrounds, different privileges as well as different strengths and talents, and they all have such unique experiences. At the same time, I think going back to the question you asked earlier about their attitudes, I think that for me, that is really what brings them together. And, I think that they had this sense of purpose in life, this sense that they weren't just doing this for themselves. I'm not sure, if the thought crossed their mind, but I think that, in the beginning when they were trying to do these things, I think they were just following their dreams and their passions. At the same time, I think that what really motivated them and helped them maybe to stay strong, I'm not sure about this, it's just speculation, was that sense that, if they did this, they would be opening those doors. And as soon as they got into the positions that they were in, they made sure that other people joined them. I know that's true of Evelyn Miralles working for NASA. She's running a program right now to make sure that women join her. And she's a virtual reality engineer, and she wants to make sure that there are more women around her helping her with these projects and, creating their own projects. And I know that was true from Sor Juana Inés in the 1600s. She already had that idea. And so I think that was something that really gave them a sense of purpose as they made their own way, knowing that they'd be bringing in all these people with them. They didn't want to be just tokens, they wanted it to be a whole movement where women were just included. Mm-hmm. So I think I would say that, but it's so hard to say with so many different experiences.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly a certain amount of personal courage too. I mean, all of these women faced obstacles in some way or another. And then a lot of them, especially ones that were working for social justice and activisms, they faced a lot of personal dangers too. So definitely, I think a sense of purpose and a sense of courage and a sense of believing in themselves was all very common. So what are you hoping your young readers take away from the book?
Oh, I mean, as a teacher, just seeing any student with this book has been such a joy these days. It's been getting so much love from kids, which is great. And I think what I really hope that they take away from it is that they feel inspired. They feel that they can relate, as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, and that they feel like, I have something to give to this story as well. It's a whole, there was a reason that I wanted it to be chronological. And I really wanted children to feel that sense of purpose that I was talking about, but in this greater history that they have these stories to write, they're going to be part of this narrative, and they have wonderful talents and, you know, their unique collection of strengths to bring to the story. And I hope that they really feel inspired to become part of it and add to it.
So do you have any plans to do any similar books in the future? Are you going to be working on any other book projects?
Yes, I do have, well, I do have books coming up. I wouldn't say they're exactly similar. I'm working on a book with Margarita Engel that's celebrating Latinx history as well. But I think I definitely want to continue writing stories like these, but not necessarily quite like Latinitas. I have a lot of ideas going around in my head, but I do have some projects coming up working with as an illustrator specifically, and then making my own picture book, my first one. So for sure.
Are you still teaching? Do you still teach?
I'm working with the library here in Guatemala, the National Library, doing a series of workshops. And I'm working also with a program in the US, in DC, doing a series of workshops. But I'm not a full-time teacher the way that I was before. It's more specific.
Oh. What are the workshops in Guatemala? I'm curious about that.
There are literacy workshops with the library. So just teaching some of the reading strategies and things like that, you know, for younger children, teaching things like how to break down a story into the beginning, middle, and end. As simple as that, up to, you know, how to find meaning and things like that, and figure out what's important about a story or what it's trying to say. So those types of literacy workshops.
Great, good. Well, you know, is there anyone else that you'd like to tell us about before we go? Are there any other people you'd like to feature?
Well, I guess there, like I was saying, there's some personal connections to some of these stories. I mentioned Gumer Sindapayes, who I love so much, and it was so special to me that I got some help with this one. The Congresswoman, Balbina Herrera, she helped me, giving me some pieces of her story, as well as Dania Batista. So that one is very personal to me because I got that help. And Rigoberta Menchutum, here in Guatemala, she actually gave me feedback on her story, and we worked on it, especially the Spanish version. So that was really important. And I know you said one, but there's three. Susana Torre is the last one, the architect. She's been encouraging of this project from the very, very beginning. And it was her story about building a little nest for birds and trying to figure out what made something feel like home that inspired her to be an architect later in her life. That really inspired.
Is she the person who did the Firehouse?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that was a great story. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about her for people that may not be familiar?
Yeah, so when she was little in Argentina, she had this experience building these nests for birds, and she was trying to figure out what it was that made something feel like home, because the birds actually didn't pick her nest. They didn't want to, they ended up always picking their own nest that they had built for their home. And I wouldn't say that it was like a direct line, because she did many things in her life before she decided to become an architect. But I think that the fact that that idea stayed with her, and now she creates these spaces like the Firehouse that you mentioned, that was one of her big projects. And what she did was she made the Firehouse a welcoming space for women. And, you know, thinking of women entering the workforce at that time, it would have been very different had she not thought of, okay, what are going to be places where firemen and women can come together. And so she expanded the kitchen, and she got rid of locker rooms, you know, so that it wouldn't be like, oh, all the bonding is taking place in the locker rooms, and, you know, the women coming in are on the sidelines or kind of left out of this whole situation. And she really thought, how can I make this a place where, you know, both genders feel like it's their space? And she's applied that to office spaces and parks and all these different spaces, trying to think of how it can be welcoming to everyone and feel like a place where they belong. And I just thought that was so beautiful. So she was one of the first stories that I found, and she reached out to me, and I actually got a chance to personally interview her. And so she's been a big help in this project from the very beginning, as well as a big inspiration.
That's great. Well, I think if we could go back to one of my favorites, maybe to wrap us up.
Sure.
I mentioned her briefly, but the ballet dancer Alicia Alonso, would you tell us about that? I thought that was such a beautiful story.
Yeah, she's incredible. So she was a ballet dancer growing up in Cuba, and she went to New York to really launch her career. And she started experiencing problems with her sight not too long after she got to New York, and she had a surgery that she had on her eyes, and she had these bandages, and she wasn't allowed to open her eyes for months. And she wanted to know all the steps of the upcoming ballet Giselle, and so he would draw them for her in the palm of her hand. And little by little, she started knowing all the different steps that for this beautiful ballet that was coming up. And little did she know, when she got the bandages taken off, actually the surgery had not been successful and she still couldn't see. But the prima ballerina who would have been doing Giselle was no longer able to do that. She got sick, and Alicia Alonso was so brave. And even though she could not see, she said, I know this by heart now. I've been, learning these steps from my husband. And she did it. And she was just breathtaking, and the audience loved her. And I honestly, as someone who's an artist, I can't imagine what it would be like to try and illustrate without being able to see. And I imagine for a dancer, there's so many things that you would, take for granted, being able to see them. And she just has such a sense of her own self, her physical self in space, that she was able to do this without being able to see. And it's just one of the most incredible stories.
It really is. It's just amazing that somebody can do that and know their bodies and and just be so graceful and talented. And it was a beautiful story. So thank you. Well, Juliet, I thank you so much for joining us and for this just amazing, inspiring book. I really did enjoy it, and I plan on sharing it with tons of readers, my own children. I think it's just wonderful. Like I said, we're always saying how much representation matters and how important it is for children to be able to see themselves in the pages of books. So thank you so much for bringing that to our readers. And I hope this is read and shared very, very widely.
Thank you so much. And it's been such an honor and a pleasure talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.